The courtroom was alive with noise, the kind of buzzing sound you hear before a storm. Reporters shuffled in with their cameras. Lawyers whispered strategies to their clients, and curious citizens packed themselves into the wooden benches as if it were a theater show. It wasn't just another trial. It was a public spectacle, a high-profile case that had attracted more attention than usual. People wanted drama. They wanted scandal. They wanted someone to point fingers at. But none of them had any idea that the biggest drama of the day would not come from the case itself, but from a woman they were about to see. A woman who would flip the entire room upside down. The heavy wooden doors creaked open and in stormed two uniformed police officers. Between them, they pushed a woman forward. She was tall, dignified, and carried herself with an unusual calmness. Despite the rough treatment, she clutched a brown leather briefcase in her hands as though it carried something more precious than gold. But the cops didn't treat her like she was someone important. No, they shoved her, laughed at her, and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the room to hear. The humiliation begins. Look at this one, the first officer chuckled, tugging her arm a little too hard. What is she doing here? She doesn't belong in a courtroom. The second officer smirked, glancing at the crowd. Maybe she's here to sweep the floors. Hey, sweetheart, the janitor's closet is down the hall. The courtroom erupted in laughter. People slapped their knees. A few even pointed at her as though she were part of the entertainment. The woman, however, didn't react. She didn't flinch. She didn't fight back. She simply straightened her jacket, kept her chin high, and kept walking forward. This composure made the officers laugh harder. What's the matter? Catgut your tongue, one sneered. She thinks she's too good to answer us, the other added. The spectators whispered amongst themselves. Some felt a twinge of discomfort at the way the officers were acting, but no one said anything. In fact, some of the lawyers sitting at the front smirked as if they agreed. To them, she was just another black woman who had lost her way in a place that wasn't meant for her. Crowd's reaction? The gallery started murmuring louder. Why is she even here? One man whispered. Maybe she's some defendant's relative, another guessed. Nah, look at her. She's probably here to beg for mercy. The laughter spread like wildfire. People pulled out their phones, recording her humiliation like it was a circus act. The air smelled faintly of cheap coffee, old wood, and mockery. One woman in the crowd shook her head and whispered to her friend, "Poor thing. Doesn't even realize she's in the wrong place." Her friend giggled. Yeah, watch the judge kick her out. Still, the woman being mocked didn't break. She simply walked with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. Click, click, click. Each step was steady, unwavering, and that unsettled the officers more than they were willing to admit. The officers doubled down. As they neared the front of the courtroom, one officer leaned closer to her ear, his voice dripping with venom. You think you're somebody. You're nothing. You're just another face we'll forget by tomorrow. The other officer added, louder this time. Maybe she's here to clean the judge's desk. Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll make sure you get the job after this. The crowd exploded in laughter again. The sound was cruel, echoing off the tall ceilings and bouncing across the wooden panels of the courtroom. But the woman's silence spoke louder than their insults. The bailiff notices. At the front of the courtroom, the bailiff frowned. He was an older man, seasoned by years of service. He had seen plenty of arrogant cops before, but something about the woman's calmness made him pause. Officers, he said firmly, that's enough. But the cops only scoffed. Relax, old man. We're just having a little fun. Yeah, don't tell us how to do our job. The bailiff shook his head slowly. He didn't know who the woman was, but something told him. These officers were about to regret every word. The woman's silence. The woman stopped walking for a moment. She adjusted her briefcase, then lifted her chin even higher. Her silence wasn't a weakness. It was power. It was the kind of silence that made people uncomfortable, because deep down, they knew she was not what they thought she was. The crowd murmured again. Why isn't she saying anything? She's too scared? No. Look at her eyes. She's not scared at all. The officers felt it too, a creeping unease that crawled up their spines. But they covered it with more insults. Keep moving. one snapped, shoving her forward again. Yeah, don't waste the court's time. She obeyed, not because she was weak, but because she knew. She knew the moment of truth was seconds away. Building suspense. The courtroom grew quiet for a moment. The case everyone had come to watch was forgotten. All eyes were on this mysterious black woman and the officers who mocked her. She walked toward the front. The officers followed closely, sneering, whispering more cruel words. The gallery leaned forward in their seats. What's she doing? Why is she walking toward the judge's bench? She's crazy? Someone stop her. But no one moved. No one stopped her. The bailiff's eyes narrowed. He was starting to understand. Suspense cliffhanger. Finally, the woman reached the front. She placed her briefcase neatly on the desk reserved for the judge. She straightened her jacket, smoothed her hair, and looked around the room. The officers burst into laughter again. Look at her. She thinks she's the judge now. Go on, sweetheart. Sit in the chair. Give us a good laugh. The gallery erupted once more. But then, the heavy doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. All rise. The bailiff's voice boomed across the chamber. The crowd stood. The officers smirked. But the woman didn't move. She was already standing in the place meant for the judge. The bailiff's next words dropped like a thunderclap. For Judge Williams? The courtroom froze. The same woman they mocked, shoved, and humiliated was the judge herself. The courtroom's spectacle. The gavel struck once more. Bang. The sharp crack echoed like thunder across the packed courtroom, demanding silence. All eyes turned to the front where Judge Harrison, a man with years of unchecked authority, sat leaning back in his chair with a smirk plastered across his face. His robe was wrinkled, his expression smug, and his voice carried the arrogance of someone who had never been challenged. Across the polished wooden floor, in the witness stand, sat a black woman. Her wrists were still red from the handcuffs that had been removed just minutes earlier. Her blouse, though neat, carried the creases of the holding cell. Yet, despite the humiliation she had endured, her posture was straight, her chin lifted, and her eyes burned with quiet determination. She was not broken, far from it. The prosecutor, a sharp-dressed man in a navy blue suit, paced like a lion in a cage. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced with theatrical exaggeration, we are here today because this woman dared to disrespect the law, to resist the very authority that keeps our society safe. She was disorderly, uncooperative, and a danger to public peace. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience seated on the benches. Some leaned forward eagerly, eager to see the downfall of the woman they had already judged guilty in their minds. Others shook their heads, sensing the injustice brewing in plain sight. The defense attorney, a young, nervous man fresh out of law school, stood up hesitantly. His voice trembled as he said, Your Honor, my client, she. He stuttered, clearly overwhelmed by the hostile environment. The judge rolled his eyes dramatically, earning chuckles from the gallery. And then it began. The humiliation. Officer Miller, one of the arresting cops, strutted forward to the stand. His uniform was pristine, his badge polished, but his smirk was cruel. He pointed at the woman with exaggerated disdain. This one. She thought she could talk back. She thought she was above the law. We had to show her what happens when someone forgets their place. The courtroom erupted with whispers. Some laughed. Others frowned. The black woman's lips tightened, but she remained silent. Her gaze fixed on Miller with an intensity that unsettled him for a moment. But he quickly shook it off and continued. She resisted arrest, he said confidently. She raised her voice. She disrespected me in public. And when someone like her does that, it sets a bad example. Someone like her. The words stung in the air like poison. The prosecutor nodded in approval. Thank you, Officer Miller. You've done your duty, as always. The woman finally spoke. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet fire. Your duty? Or your ego? The words cut sharper than any blade. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. The judge slammed his gavel. Bang, bang. Silence. You will not speak unless spoken to. He barked, his face red with fury. But the damage was already done. The audience shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, doubt crept into their expressions. The prosecutor, sensing the shift, quickly tried to regain control. Your Honor, Clearly, this woman shows no remorse. She continues to disrespect this court. Her arrogance proves exactly why she doesn't belong here. Doesn't belong here, she repeated, her voice louder now. Or do you mean I don't belong in your idea of justice? The gallery erupted again, this time with mixed reactions, some gasps, some nods of agreement. The judge leaned forward, his eyes narrowing into slits. Enough? If you continue this behavior, I will hold you in contempt of court. She leaned forward too, her eyes locking with his. And if you continue this charade, I will hold you accountable. The room froze. Nobody ever dared speak to Judge Harrison that way. Not lawyers, not officials, not even other judges. But here she was, a woman they had mocked, belittled, and dragged in like a criminal, staring him down without fear. The tension thickened, heavy as stone. The prosecutor fumbled with his papers. The young defense attorney stared in shock, and the crowd leaned forward, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Because this wasn't just a case anymore. This was a battle for dignity, a battle for truth, a battle that would leave the entire courtroom, maybe even the entire city, speechless. And as she sat back, folding her hands calmly in her lap, her lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile. Not arrogance, not defiance, but certainty. She knew something no one else in that room did, something that would flip the entire trial upside down. And soon, everyone, Judge Harrison, Officer Miller, the prosecutor, and every single skeptic in the gallery would discover exactly who she really was. Whispers of doubt. The air in the courtroom had shifted. What began as a show trial, designed to humiliate a black woman in front of the city, was turning into something else entirely. People in the gallery leaned forward, their eyes darting between Judge Harrison and the woman seated in the witness stand. Her words still echoed in their minds, and if you continue this charade, I will hold you accountable. It wasn't just defiance, it was a promise. The prosecutor cleared his throat nervously, trying to regain control of the room. He slammed his palm against the table, papers scattering. Your Honor, this mockery cannot stand. This defendant thinks she can challenge the very foundation of our legal system. If we allow her arrogance to continue, chaos will follow. The judge nodded slowly, clearly saving the chance to strike back. Indeed, he sneered, order must be preserved. Respect must be demanded. Without it, the system collapses. He leaned forward, fixing the woman with a cold glare. You are a guest in this court, and you will behave as one. Do you understand? The woman didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, as though studying him. Then, with deliberate calm, she replied, respect is not demanded. It is earned. A ripple spread through the courtroom like a wave. Some of the audience gasped, others chuckled under their breath. Even the nervous young defense attorney seemed to straighten a little, as if emboldened by her courage. But not everyone was impressed. Officer Miller, still sitting near the stand, slammed his fist against his knee in frustration. See what I mean? He shouted, his voice cracking through the tension. She thinks she's above the law. People like her need to be put in their place before they infect the rest of society with this rebellion. His words carried venom. People like her. The phrase burned, leaving the gallery divided. Some nodded in agreement, but others exchanged uncomfortable glances. One elderly woman in the back shook her head slowly, whispering to her neighbor, he sounds less like a protector of the law and more like a bully. The murmurs grew louder. Doubt was creeping into the minds of those who had come expecting a simple trial. The defense attorney, still fumbling with his notes, finally found his courage. His voice shook but carried a spark of fire. Your Honor, he said, stepping forward, what we are witnessing here isn't justice. It's intimidation. My client has been mocked, insulted, and degraded from the moment she walked into this room. That is not due process. That is prejudice. The gallery stirred again, louder this time. The judge slammed his gavel furiously. Bang, bang, bang. Silence, or I'll clear this courtroom, he bellowed, but his voice no longer commanded the absolute authority it once did. For the first time in years, the power was slipping through his fingers, and everyone could feel it. The woman, still seated calmly, finally broke her silence again. Her tone was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. "You all think you know me. A defendant, a troublemaker, a woman to be laughed at. But you know nothing about who I really am." Her eyes swept across the gallery, pausing just long enough on each spectator to make them squirm. Then she turned her gaze to the judge himself. "And you," she said with razor-sharp clarity, "are about to learn that truth the hard way." Gasps echoed around the room. The tension was unbearable, a rope pulled so tight it felt ready to snap. The prosecutor scoffed, though his voice cracked slightly. Big words from someone sitting in the defendant's chair. She leaned forward, her expression calm, almost amused. "Chairs can change. Power can shift. And when it does." Her words trailed off deliberately, leaving the sentence unfinished. A cliffhanger hanging in the heavy silence. The gallery erupted again, no longer whispers but full-blown chatter. Who was she? What did she mean? What was she hiding? Even the young defense attorney, standing inches away from her, looked bewildered. He whispered, almost to himself, "What are you planning?" She didn't answer. Instead, she sat back, her fingers laced together, her lips curving into that same faint smile from before. She knew exactly what was coming, because the courtroom thought they were watching a trial, but in reality, they were watching the opening act of a reveal that would leave them all speechless. And in just a matter of hours, the gavel wouldn't be in Judge Harrison's hand anymore. It would be in hers. The unmasking. The weight of her words lingered in the courtroom like a thundercloud about to burst. No one moved. No one dared to breathe too loudly. The woman stood there, her stack of documents like a weapon, daring anyone to challenge her. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped the gavel. His eyes darted between the woman and the papers she had laid before him. He had seen countless defendants in his courtroom pleading, crying, breaking down, but never one who stood this tall, this composed, this fearless. The prosecutor finally broke the silence. His laugh was sharp and brittle, echoing awkwardly against the walls. "What is this circus?" he sneered, stepping forward. "These papers don't mean anything. Anyone can print fancy words and claim to be somebody. But we know who you are. You're nothing but a liar." The woman tilted her head, a cold smile touching her lips. "Is that so?" She picked up the top document and held it high so the jury could see. The bold letters gleamed under the lights. Doctor of Law, Harvard University. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Even the jurors shifted uncomfortably. Harvard, the name itself carried undeniable weight. The prosecutor's smirk faltered. That could be fake. But she wasn't finished. She placed another document down. Civil rights attorney, national recognition. Another, former legal advisor to the Department of Justice. And then the final one, thicker, more imposing than the rest. A certificate embossed with the golden seal of the state, appointment of judge. The room erupted in whispers, shock, and disbelief. The woman didn't just have credentials, she had the ultimate authority. She wasn't a criminal sitting in front of them. She was one of them. No, she was above them. The defense attorney dropped his pen, his mouth hanging open. This can't be real," he muttered under his breath. Judge Harrison slammed the gavel again, his voice trembling for the first time. "Order." I said order in the court. But his command carried no weight anymore. The authority in the room had shifted. The gallery wasn't looking at him anymore, they were looking at her. The woman straightened her shoulders, her voice calm but thunderous. "You mocked me? You dragged me through this court as if I were beneath you. You thought my skin, my gender, and my silence defined me. But you never asked who I really was." Her eyes locked with Judge Harrison's, unyielding. "You see, I am not just some defendant you can toy with. I'm Judge Naomi Carter, and while you tried to put me on trial, what you've really done is expose yourselves." The gallery gasped again, louder this time. The jurors whispered feverishly among themselves. The prosecutor stumbled back, his face pale. Judge Harrison's jaw tightened. That's impossible. If what you're saying is true, then why are you even here?" Naomi's smile was small, sharp, and unshakable. "Because corruption runs deep in this courthouse. Because men like you believe power belongs only to those who look like you, think like you, act like you. I came here to prove that no amount of lies, No amount of intimidation can bury the truth forever. The tension was electric now. Every word out of her mouth cut like lightning, exposing cracks in the walls of authority around her. The prosecutor's voice cracked as he shouted, "She's lying. This is some kind of setup. Guards, remove her immediately." But even the officers hesitated. They had mocked her, shoved her, and treated her like nothing moments ago. But now they saw her for what she truly was. A woman with more authority in her pinky finger than they had in their entire careers. Her presence was undeniable. Her truth was uncheckable. And everyone in the courtroom realized something terrifying. The trial wasn't about her anymore. The trial was about them. And Naomi Carter was about to turn their world upside down. The courtroom, moments ago a place of arrogance and control, now felt like a powder keg ready to explode. Judge Naomi Carter no longer the silent defendant, but the revealed. Truth stood in the center of it all like a storm that couldn't be stopped. The prosecutor's face glistened with sweat. His voice shook as he tried to restore control. This is absurd. She's fabricating her entire identity. Don't let her fool you with theatrics. Naomi raised a single eyebrow and bothered. Fabricating? Then perhaps the court would like to hear from the State Bar Association. Or maybe the Chief Justice who swore me in. The gallery gasped, louder this time. Phones were already out, recording. The story was no longer trapped within four walls, it was spilling into the world outside. Naomi lifted another sheet of paper, this one stamped with an official letterhead. I was appointed as a federal judge in this very state, and I know exactly what this courthouse has been hiding. The prosecutor stumbled back. Objection, he screamed, his voice cracking. This is irrelevant. But Naomi's voice cut through his like thunder. What's irrelevant is your lies. What's irrelevant is the corruption you've been hiding under the cover of justice. What's very relevant is that I have evidence documents, witnesses, testimonies that expose everything. The room erupted in chaos. The jurors exchanged nervous glances. The audience leaned forward, hungry for the truth. Even the bailiffs froze, uncertain whether to follow the judge's orders or Naomi's commanding presence. She took a slow step forward, her voice rising like a tide. "Let's talk about Prosecutor Daniels," she began, her gaze slicing into him. "The man who stands here pretending to defend justice while secretly taking bribes from corporations to bury their crimes. I have the bank records. I have the emails. Do you deny it?" Daniels' face turned red, his lips trembling. Lies. Baseless lies. But his voice lacked conviction, and the gallery knew it. Murmurs turned into shouts. Naomi didn't stop. She pivoted toward the bench. "And Judge Harrison so quick to silence me. So quick to declare me guilty before I ever spoke. Perhaps because you've been covering your own tracks for years. Records of cases dismissed under your authority in exchange for campaign donations. Names, dates, signatures, I have them all." Judge Harrison slammed his gavel so hard it splintered. "Enough, I will have you removed." Naomi's voice thundered back, louder than his gavel. "You will listen. For once, you will be held accountable." The gallery erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in. The air was electric, every heart beating to the rhythm of revelation. Naomi stepped closer to the bench, her words sharp and merciless. "This courthouse is rotten. You humiliated me, thinking I was powerless. But I was here for a reason. To reveal the corruption that poisons our justice system. To show the people that the ones shouting about law and order are the very ones breaking it." Judge Harrison's face turned ashen. You can't prove any of this." Naomi leaned in, her eyes locking onto his like a hawk to prey. "Oh, I can, and I will. Every file I've brought, every record I hold, it's all going public. Right now." She raised her phone, tapped the screen, and a chime rang out. "A live broadcast. Documents are uploaded to the cloud." Screens across the courtroom lit up as her evidence appeared on every device connected to the signal. The audience gasped as they read the truth in real-time: bank transfers, email exchanges, confidential memos. The kind of evidence that couldn't be denied, couldn't be hidden anymore. Naomi's voice rose to its peak, fierce and unyielding. "You wanted to humiliate me. But the world will remember today not as the day Naomi Carter was dragged into court. They will remember it as the day this entire system was dragged into the light. The courtroom was chaos now, shouts, tears, fear, disbelief. Some clapped, others screamed. Officers hesitated, unsure whether to arrest her or protect her. But Naomi stood steady, unbroken, unafraid. And for the first time, the powerful men who thought they controlled everything realized they were trapped. Because Naomi Carter wasn't just a defendant anymore. She was the judge. She was the truth. And she was their reckoning. The turning point. The courtroom, once an arena of intimidation and control, now trembled under Naomi Carter's revelations. The once confident prosecutor, Daniels, wiped his forehead with a shaking hand, his swagger evaporating in front of the flashing phones and murmuring crowd. Judge Harrison's face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like stone about to crack. But the rest of the room, the jurors leaned forward in their seats, wide-eyed, whispering among themselves. The gallery no longer looked at Naomi with disdain or doubt. They looked at her with awe, even admiration. Something was shifting, and everyone could feel it. Officer Miller, the one who had mocked her earlier, stood stiff against the wall, his arms crossed, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty. He had ridiculed her, called her names, and dragged her into this very courtroom. And now, he realized he hadn't just mocked a woman. He had mocked a judge. Naomi's voice rang out again, sharp as lightning. You all sat here and watched while they tried to break me. You saw them laugh, humiliate, and silence me. But now you see the truth. These men are not guardians of justice. They are criminals wearing robes and ties. A wave of murmurs swept the gallery. A woman in the back shouted, "She's right." Another followed, exposed them all. The prosecutor slammed his fist on the table. This is outrageous. You can't just. But Naomi turned toward him slowly, her gaze cutting through him like a blade. Can't I? Do you think I came here unprepared? Do you think I didn't know the risks of exposing men like you? You tried to bury me in lies, but I came here with the truth, and the truth doesn't need permission. The gallery roared in approval. The energy shifted so strongly that it was undeniable. People who had come expecting to see a trial now leaned forward, as though watching history unfold. Naomi's next move shattered what little order remained. She pointed directly at Judge Harrison. You call yourself honorable, but there is no honor in silencing the innocent. There is no honor in selling justice to the highest bidder. Today, the people see you for what you are, not a judge, but a criminal hiding behind a gavel. Gasps, shouts, phones are recording every word. Judge Harrison pounded his desk with fury. Bailiffs, remove her now. The officers looked at one another, hesitating. For the first time, their loyalty wavered. Some shifted toward Naomi, not with aggression, but with uncertainty. She saw it, the hesitation, the doubt, and seized it. You think these men will protect you? Naomi asked, turning to the officers. Do you not see? When their corruption is exposed, they will throw you under the bus to save themselves. But if you stand with the truth today, history will remember that you dared to do what was right. The words hit like a hammer. Officer Miller shifted again, lowering his arms. Another officer took a step back from Judge Harrison's bench. The prosecutor shouted desperately, "Don't listen to her. She's manipulating you." Naomi lifted her hand, holding up the golden seal of her judicial appointment again. No, I am reminding them of their oath to protect justice, not corruption. The jurors, who had been silent for so long, now erupted. One elderly juror, his voice trembling but clear, stood and said, "If this woman is who she says she is, then this trial is a sham, and we, the jury, refuse to be part of it." The courtroom exploded in noise, cheers, shouts, applause. The gallery rose to its feet, some clapping, some chanting Naomi's name. The foundation of power was crumbling before everyone's eyes. Naomi, standing firm in the chaos, raised her voice once more, delivering a blow that shook even the walls. Today is not the day of my trial. Today is the day you wanted to strip me of my dignity. Instead, you've stripped yourselves of every shred of legitimacy, and the world is watching. Judge Harrison's gavel snapped in his hand as he slammed it down again and again, screaming for order. but there was no order left. His power was gone. And Naomi Carter, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was winning. The moment of truth. The courtroom had fallen into a tense silence. The officers who once dragged her inside were now seated at the defense table, their arrogance beginning to crumble as the walls of truth closed in. Every person in the gallery, every whisper, every gasp echoed with the same realization: this was not just another case. This was a reckoning. The woman they had mocked, manhandled, and humiliated was now their judge. And she was not about to let power, corruption, or intimidation define the outcome. She adjusted her robe, her hands steady, her eyes burning with a quiet fire. When she spoke, her voice wasn't just the sound of a judge, it was the voice of every silenced woman, every black individual who had been told they didn't belong, every person who had been dragged down only to rise again. "Officer Daniels," she said firmly, addressing the lead officer, the same man who had grabbed her face outside the courthouse. "Do you remember what you told me as you pulled me in? You said, 'People like you don't belong here.'" The officer's jaw clenched, his eyes darting nervously around the courtroom. He swallowed hard, unable to answer. The judge leaned forward, her words sharp as steel. "Well, today, I am here. One belong here, and it is you who must now answer for your actions." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, some clapping quietly, others covering their mouths in disbelief. The humiliation had flipped. What once was her moment of shame was now their trial, under the spotlight of justice. Turning the tables, she ordered the evidence to be played on the courtroom. Screens, video footage captured by bystanders outside the courthouse. The entire scene replayed in brutal clarity. The officers grabbed her arms. The angry one is shoving her face. The mocking laughter, the dismissive words. The jury shifted uncomfortably. The gallery gasped. Even the prosecutor looked pale, as though realizing that this trial had just slipped entirely out of their control. The judge paused the footage right at the moment her face was grabbed. She looked directly at the jury. "This," she said firmly, "is not how law enforcement is supposed to act. This is not justice. This is an abuse of power. And today, it ends." The officers tried to protest, their lawyers scrambling to spin excuses. Heat of the moment, misunderstanding, procedure, but every word only dug the hole deeper. The judge let them speak, then calmly dismantled each excuse with precision, citing law after law, precedent after precedent. She wasn't just passing judgment, she was teaching the entire courtroom what justice truly meant, a speech that shook the court. Then she did something unexpected. She set aside her notes, took off her glasses, and spoke from her heart. "For years," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "people like me have been told we don't belong, told we are less, told that our education, our skills, our voices, our very existence are not enough. But I stand here today as proof that they were wrong." Every eye in the room was fixed on her. Even the officers, who once smirked, now stared at the floor, stripped of their arrogance. She continued, her voice rising with conviction. "You see, justice is not about uniforms or badges or titles. It's about truth. It's about protecting the weak, holding the powerful accountable, and making sure that no one is above the law. Today, justice isn't wearing blue. Justice is wearing black robes." The crowd couldn't hold back. Applause broke out, some standing, others in tears. The bailiff tried to restore order, but even he had tears in his eyes, delivering the verdict. At last, the moment came. The officers were found guilty not just of misconduct, but of criminal abuse of authority. The sentence was heavy but fair. And as the gavel struck, the judge looked out over the room one final time. "This verdict is not just for me," she declared. "It is for every person who has been told they are less, for every voice silenced, for every dream crushed. Remember this, no matter how high someone stands, truth will always rise higher." The courtroom thundered with applause, people rising to their feet, chants of "justice, justice," filling the air. The officers were led away, their heads down, and the woman once humiliated, once mocked, stood tall as the symbol of resilience, strength, and ultimate victory. As the crowd filed out, reporters rushed to cover the historic moment. Headlines would read, Humiliated black woman shocks court as judge delivers justice against corrupt cops. But for those who were present, it wasn't just a headline, it was a revolution. And as the screen fades to black, the narrator's voice rings out, "Power can humiliate, but truth can destroy arrogance." Remember her story the next time you think you're powerless. Justice doesn't come easy, it is fought for. And when it rises, it shakes the world. If this story moved you, don't stay silent. Share it, comment your thoughts below. And most importantly, never forget that justice begins when ordinary people stand up against injustice.